sensing the absence of life, but everywhere, and... Do you see? I guess you don't. But that used to be considered a sign of mental illness. They called it absence of appropriate affect. So I left the TV sound off and I sat down at my mood organ and I experimented. And I finally found a setting for despair.
Her dark, pert face showed satisfaction, as if she had achieved something of worth.
So I put it on my schedule for twice a month. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to feel hopeless about everything.
Hey, dickheads! Like a pink laser beam of truth beaming straight from San Diego, California, straight to your brain hole. We have taken our Voight-Kampff test, and at least 2 of us have failed. So, you have to guess who that is. Yeah, I'm definitely the only one that's going to pass that test today. We are covering Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but first, we have to talk about the PKD news. There is one piece of PKD news, and it's super fucking creepy. Forbes.com.
Super creepy.
It is super creepy. Forbes.com had an article called Do Algorithms Dream of Electric Sheep? What Virtual Philip K. Dick Can Teach Us About AI. Now, the source for this article, which was in Forbes, is there was a interview done by a AI computer researcher. He did this interview with this AI that was designed through Philip K. Dick writings and computer software and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he asked him questions about coronavirus and 2020, and it was very weird and very strange and very creepy to watch. And so we'll put links to the actual article and to the video in the show notes. The video is very weird, especially for people who have watched or listened to a lot of interviews with Phil. Larry, you watched this video. What were your feelings on it?
Well, I like to say this is what Philip K. Dick would be like if he weren't trying to disguise what Philip K. Dick was like. Because that's basically, what we see in interviews is his public persona, and we can actually see the wheels turning of him, like, inventing this public persona as he's going. It's not well thought out, but the AI is, like, just spewing shit out. Like, Philip K. Dick did that in the shack. It's just like, oh, fuck, I'm high as fuck. Let's write some weird shit. And then that's how his mind worked. It seems like this is how his mind worked.
Yeah, so the AI kind of just basically has, like, it's super philosophical, too. And so here's the thing. We now have the Philip K. Dick robot, and we have this AI doing Zoom calls. So, how much is this, like, Phil's nightmare in a lot of ways? And it's like, my question...
See, I'm still not sure on that. Like...
He probably would have thought that was cool, actually.
He wanted to define what made humanity, but he wasn't necessarily saying robots couldn't be human, which, I mean, this is what the book we're going to talk about is a lot about.
I actually disagree with that. I think from all the books we've read, he treats the androids and a lot of the AI like shit.
Yeah. But he also treats people like shit. I mean,
I'm not going to say something that gets me called a super SJW.
No, say it. I mean, I can always cut it out.
No, it's fine. No, we're talking about androids. Dick, I think, then this is just something I've taken away from reading so much Dick since we started this podcast, is that there's a weird inherent fear that Dick has of androids.
You think he was worried robots... Like Terminator style, we're going to take over?
And not so much Judgment Day style. Yeah, like Dick is Linda Hamilton. He's standing at the fence. Right. Judgment Day style. No, but what I mean when I say that is I think Dick is uncomfortable with AI in that he doesn't feel that they can be even close to being human. And we see that in almost all the representations of AI. And especially, and we'll get into it, especially with this book, where
but here's the thing, Anthony, is that I agree with you that he does view it that way, but in the asking of the question,
Okay.
he is saying much more about how he feels like they could be human than someone that just has androids in their book and treats them as androids. He's constantly asking the question, are they human, instead of taking for granted that they're not.
Are you referencing
that
in
unto
this book
itself.
in particular?
What?
Are you saying in this book in particular?
I mean, in this one in particular, but in other ones as well, he's asking the question instead of taking for granted that they're not human.
But he never actually comes to a consensus on his thesis about that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know, David. Did you watch that video? I'll put a link to it.
Which is about language and how AI
and how computers can't understand like humans can.
Yeah. Well, and from an interesting perspective, and this was something that I had meant to bring up, and I'm going to use this as a segue, but it was interesting that you sent me that, is that one of the things that I wanted to bring up was one of the reasons why I have such a terrible time pronouncing names on this podcast is because I'm extremely dyslexic, and I actually went to a boarding school specifically for kids with learning disabilities because my dyslexia was so extreme.
That's why you were in boarding school?
Yeah, that's why I was in boarding school. Anyways, what that does for me is that I've learned to read very well, obviously, and because I've learned language, but
is it? Do you do it by memorization? Well, I mean, sort of what you told me was that like names trip you up because they're different all the time.
Yeah, because my brain has been trained to recognize certain words, and when I see a pattern that I don't know, it just looks like gobbledygook in my mind. And it's the only way. My dyslexia does not switch letters around like people commonly think it does. But what it does...
Well, I think that's what we were taught in the 80s and the 90s, was that it's sort of just rearranged letters, but it's not that at all, right?
Right.
It's not a rearranging.
Yeah, and what this ties back to the video that you're talking about is this guy did this video where he talked about how AI can't learn syntax in the same way that we do, because there's certain words that we define the words in our minds when we're reading it, right?
Contextually.
Yeah. And so it's funny because that's why I related to that, because I was like, I understand that. And that's one of the reasons why I butcher names, and I apologize for that ahead of time all the time. But and I'm
ahead of time, and for the past, and for every time that will ever come up.
And I think it's worse for me when we're recording because I feel like on the spot. But anyways, the point is that how AI learns language is interesting in relation to the fact that they're programming a PKD based on his words, right?
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to me when you sent that video to think about how much does this Philip K. Dick AI understand context? And then I kept wondering, like, did they program his fiction into it as well?
Which they did. I mean, that's...
Yeah. So it's interesting. And so I do think this is the most interesting piece of PKD news in a long time. So let's move on to a little book called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was published in March of 1968.
David, what was happening in 1968?
Well, much like 2020, it was a shithole of a year. In fact, one of the things that makes Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep so interesting is that it came out in the year that every time someone says what a horrible year 2020 is, the old folks go, well, it ain't nothing compared to 1968.
I mean, that was the year that Nixon got elected, right?
I believe so, but it was 1 month. March 1968, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep came out exactly 1 month to the day before Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh,
Give you some context.
and Bobby Kennedy was assassinated the same year, right?
Yep, and it was also Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was released just after the Tet Offensive in Vietnam.
For those that don't know, Tet is a holiday in Vietnam. This year, there was a surprise offensive by the Viet Cong on Tet. So, otherwise known as the Tet Offensive.
Yeah, Tet Offensive is a turning point in the conflict of the Vietnam War. All right, so that's the history.
God, I hope I got that right. If I got it wrong, I sound like an asshole.
No, I believe
the internet will come for you. You'll be fine. The internet bangs on your door at 2 a.m. on Twitter and drags you out and crucifies you digitally. It's fine. The internet. That's what it's for.
So the writing and publication history of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is next up on our agenda, and it was written directly after the last book that we read, The Ganymede Takeover. So as I would imagine...
Well, it seems like that he did learn a lot from Ray Nelson, because I would say this book is well composed, much like the last one was.
It was right after Ganymede Takeover and before he wrote Ubik, so it was between those two. But it is...
That's a hell of a period.
Yeah, and it's believed that he was kind of concurrently working on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep along with Ganymede Takeover because, when he was waiting for chapters from Ray Nelson. The exact time of when it was written in 1966 is unknown. A lot of these books, we know exactly the month or time that he's writing, but we don't know exactly in 1966 when he wrote it. It was early in the Nancy marriage, so we were in...
So it was Happy Dick?
It was Happy PKD. We have a quote from Nancy on the writing of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. She said, "Phil was working all night, and when he came to bed, he was talking like a different person." We know he was very, shall we say, pilled up when he was working on this.
66? Yeah, he was high as a fucking kite.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stories in Divine Invasions about this period, about how he was trading lots of drugs, and he had lots of people coming by to exchange stuff with him during that time. So if he was talking like a different person when he came to bed, he was probably high as a kite. And as far this was a double-day hardcover, and that first edition goes for quite a bit of money these days if you have a copy of the double-day. So here's the thing.
Why I have something that says Blade Runner on it, and I think most of us have something that says Blade Runner on it.
Boo to that cover. Mine's on my Kindle, but it's not that cover. But also
everything says Blade Runner on it.
Well, I will say that the new Del Rey edition just has this version that I got right here just has the inspiration for.
But it still says Blade Runner.
Yeah, but this is my original paperback
that's the one I originally read as well, I think.
And this one still has a receipt from the bank for a deposit in 2004, the last time I read it, that I was using as a bookmark. And but yeah, this is the version that most people, I think this is the edition that has the most sales. They sold 300.
That's the Gen X edition right there.
This edition sold the most copies of any Philip K. Dick edition of anything ever. So, and this was the one that it was in print throughout the 80s.
Yeah.
So, and I think somewhere here I have that there was 325,000 copies of that edition sold. So, and that's a lot for PKD. The manuscript arrived at SMLA on June 20th, 1966. So we do know that he wrote it in the early part of 66. Because that's when the manuscript arrived, and that's the earliest.
But and it wasn't published till 68.
Yes, and my theory is that, and I have nothing to prove this, But I don't know if he went directly to Doubleday or if he tried to sell it to Wollheim first. But it did go hardcover to Doubleday. But my thinking is, if you're thinking it's more coherent, I think Wollheim was a good editor, but he was, and you know from our interview with Betsy, that he was way overworked.
Yeah.
Doing titles out the wazoo. This also might be the era where Wollheim...
And he was like, hey, kid, when do they go to space?
This is also the era that Don was leaving Ace and striking out on his own. So one of the reasons why we might have that 2-year gap is Ace might not have been available to fill because Don may have been gone. I'd have to check with Betsy on the dates on that. But it took 2 years. It came out on Doubleday. But my thinking is that he's got an editor who's going to have more time to focus energy on cleaning up the draft. So he may have been more heavily edited through Doubleday than he would have been on the Ace pipeline. It's just a theory. Did you guys notice the dedication too?
I did.
That Tim Powers and
his wife
Powers. So
yeah,
that was cool.
We met
what a cool
those
book.
people.
Larry and I had cigarettes with one of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's cool. Like if you're Tim, that's a pretty cool book to have to be the one that's dedicated to you. And I know this is going to be shocking. So break.
All right, I'm holding on to my seat.
I can't wait for these. This is my favorite part.
There were bad titles.
My favorite.
What?
Yeah,
and they're bad, you guys. They're bad.
Are they?
The last one is real bad.
So
all right.
Philip K. Dick had created a list that he sent out in one of the letters for potential titles. And the first one being The Electric Toad.
Okay. All right.
Semicolon, Do Androids Dream.
Oh, my God.
The Electric Sheep, just by itself.
Not bad. I mean, that's pretty much what we got.
Yeah, just strap in for this last one, Larry.
Okay, are you ready for the last one? This is very similar to the opening crawl to the new Star Wars, in a way. Okay, this title is The Killers Are Among Us, cried Rick Deckard to the special man.
Awful. Straight awful, son.
You okay?
There's not one part of that title that's worth keeping. Like you can't like shorten it in some way and go, oh, this part would be good-ish. Like every part of that is awful.
Imagine trying to put that on a spine or on a book cover. Good Lord.
The Killers Are Among Us, cried Rick Deckard to the special man.
Who's the special man?
Isidore.
Yeah.
He's
the special man.
Oh, special. Okay, I'm on board again.
So, if you were thinking that, at least this time he didn't mine a short story in order to build and expound upon. So
he did.
Oh, yes, he did. It's a little ditty called The Little Black Box, where either of you able to read The Little Black Box before?
No, I just found out about it yesterday. So.
No, I just found out about it right now.
Okay. Just again, it's not the whole idea, but the Mercerism and the empathy boxes are kind of the thing that the Little Black Box is about. Here's another thing about the Little Black Box is that it was almost put into the Ganymede takeover for some random reason. And so at one point, Phil tried to work the Little Black Box into Ganymede takeover.
Trying to think of how that would work.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Joan Hayashi, the character from Ganymede Takeover, is in the empathy box. Okay, so PKD did talk about the Little Black Box, and we have a quote.
I made use of this story when I wrote my novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Actually, the idea is better put forth in the story. Here, a religion is regarded as a menace to all political systems. Therefore, it, too, is a kind of political system, perhaps even an ultimate one. The concept of caritas, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, or agape, I know I'm saying that correctly, shows up in my writing as the key to the authentic human. The android, which is the unauthentic human, the more reflex machine, is unable to experience empathy. In this story, it's never clear whether Mercer is an invader from some other world, but he must be. In a sense, all religious leaders are, but not from another planet as such.
Which is interesting because he's kind of, the way he's talking about Mercer there is kind of like Three Stigmata-ish, as if like in the empathy box there's this kind of other outwardly force that's like getting into your brain through the empathy box. Yeah, and so the next quote that we have from PKD comes from an interview and between Apel and Briggs, and PKD said at the outset,
who's playing PKD? Am I playing PKD or one of you playing PKD?
PKD, I'll do Briggs.
Somebody, all right. Somebody has told me that I have to see that film.
I want to hear better voices.
Somebody has told me that I have to see that film last year at Marienbad. Anyway, I don't like Do Androids Dream at all. I really loathe that book.
Oh, good. I have to tell you, I detest it.
Yeah, there are certain books of mine I wish I could shovel under, and that's one of them.
Yeah, so that's a pretty...
Better now, Larry?
Yes.
That's a pretty...
I am satisfied.
That's a pretty dismissive comment. It's interesting that the guy interviewed him was like, yeah, I fucking hate that book. Like, fuck you. But in May 1968, Phil was pretty hard up, as usual, and he received a letter from Sidney Meredith telling him of the sale of the German rights for androids, which was $375. And the letter also had some German tax forms. But in the letter to Dick, the Marissa Howell, with Marcia, Marcia Howell of Doubleday and this was in the end of August. She announced the royalties for a 6-month period in 1968, which amounted to $671.38, which doesn't sound like a lot in our dollars today, but Now Wait for Last Year made a whole whopping $6.32.
Got you.
Damn.
Yeah. So he made double the amount from the Doubleday that he did from the German edition. The only other, it's funny because as seminal and as important of a work as Do Androids is for Phil, there's not a lot of quotes from him about it. In fact, the next quote that we got was in a letter to Roger Zelazny.
Well, I actually have a theory about that, David. Well, I think I'm going to pose this question to you guys. And I might be jumping ahead a little bit, so forgive me if I am. Fine. But I think the popularity of this book, I think the fact that this book is taught widely, has more to do with it being based off of Blade Runner than anything to do with the actual book itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, reading it, even when I read it the first time, it's almost impossible to separate it from the movie, like entirely as its own thing. So yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a huge factor in the success of this book.
And so Dick may not. So we think of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep as being kind of this staple of science fiction literature.
But to him, it wasn't even a popular book.
Right. To him, Dick was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not, to sound crass, but fuck that book.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's the quote you just said.
Right.
Like,
well, I've been thinking about this a lot since I read it because for me, and I didn't say this when we started, this is the first time I've read it.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire time I'm reading it and I'm thinking, I really do feel like this book's popularity is forever tethered to Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Of course it is. But, and I think But I will say, I do think that there's a lot of good stuff going on in this book, separating it from Blade Runner and.
I'll get in the octagon when we get there with you.
Yeah,
We'll hash that out.
No, I think we're definitely going to have a good debate on that, and I think, but I do think that even before that, I do think Phil had a healthy respect for it eventually because it was one that he consistently sold the film rights to before it ever actually got made throughout the 70s. So in this letter to Roger Zelazny, we do have this quote from Phil.
So Phil asked Roger Zelazny, "How did you do on paperback resale? I got 9,000 for Electric Sheep. I hope you got more. The novel deserves it."
So he made a lot more on the
That should have ended with kid.
Yeah.
The novel deserved it, kid.
But we do have a quote that shows a little bit more of the positivity towards Electric Sheep, because I don't think he hated it. I think that first quote, you guys know that Dick contradicts himself constantly, especially on whether his books are good or not. Like he can be in a mood and be like,
well, I think more than anything, he's a people pleaser. And you can see that in his interviews that, yeah, he has a perspective, but the person he's talking to, he really wants to make happy. So if the person says, I didn't like this thing, he's going to be like, me either. Fuck that thing.
Like if we were interviewing, when we interview the AI, it's definitely going to be like cosmic puppets, very bad. But
right.
I think Dick wasn't always. Let me rephrase this. I think Dick found himself unsatisfied with a lot of these books, and he didn't know whether to love it or like it, or love it or hate it himself. So when he's talking to certain people about it, and as Larry said, he kind of adopts the person's he's talking to opinion about his own books, because maybe he's like, oh, it's validating the one half of me that didn't like the book, and then over here on the left, a different book that he didn't like. He's like, oh, this is validating the part of me that I did like about that.
That's true. That's true. It's natural as an artist to love the things you create and hate them in the same proportion. So
Correct.
Yeah, it makes sense to be like, yeah, that thing I did is pretty good, but there's these spots that suck, and maybe the whole thing sucks because of these spots that I didn't quite get right. And that makes
but
sense.
also, I don't think Dick wanted to talk down about something that could have made him some money.
Yeah,
If he's out there.
He was also a bad salesman.
Yeah, talking smack about a book. Then if the author doesn't like it, why are you going to buy it?
Right.
So just my 2 cents on that.
but we do have this last quote of his.
Do Androids Dream has sold very well and has been eyed intently by a film company who have in fact purchased an option to it. My wife thinks it's a good book. I like it for one thing. It deals with society in which animals are adored and rare, and a man who owns a real sheep is somebody, and feels for that sheep a vast bond of love and empathy. Willis, my tomcat, strides silently over the pages of that book, being important as he is, with his long, golden, twitching tail. Make them understand, he says to me, that animals are really that important right now. He says this, and then eats up all his food we've been warming for our baby. Some cats are far too pushy. The next thing he'll want to do is write SF novels. I hope he does. None of them will sell. Wow. Way to not encourage your tomcat.
Right?
It's funny because I had the thought when I read that quote that I'm surprised no one's ever published a novel under the pseudonym Willis K. Dick.
Yeah, right.
One last thing on the writing and publication history, which is that it is interesting that Del Rey, this is the only book that Del Rey has held on to. So if you're looking, so when you have this on your shelf, it won't look the same as all the other vintage or Mariner editions because Del Rey has held on to this one. And
It'll have a different forgettable Photoshopped looking cover.
Yeah.
I actually like this one because if you look at it at first, you don't see the Android face, and you kind of have to turn it. So I actually do like this one because you don't
You think that's Batty?
It's probably Betty, or it's a Rosen model still in the mold, Nexus 6 still in the mold. Maybe.
Right. Yeah.
And because I actually think this has to do with the book, which is novel for a Philip K. Dick cover, this modern era.
That's right. We're adding you, Mariner.
That's it for the writing and publication history. So you know what time it is?
What? What time? I'm gonna do a harmonica.
Jay Tweed.
That's me. That's me.
Yeah, story breakdown while the rest of us go pee.
Let me tell you about a book, a little book I know, called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So we start out with Rick and his wife, Iran, hanging out in their living room, and it's the morning, and she's like, I like being depressed. And he's like, yeah, but being depressed sucks. And you should do this thing where you're like, my dude is awesome. And she's like, I don't want to do my dude is awesome. I want to be depressed like a couple times a month. It'll be cool. And then Rick goes outside and he's like, oh, I have this electric sheep, and my next door neighbor is having another horse, and horses are better than sheep, but maybe I can buy a horse, but I can't because I can't afford it. Oh, and then I have to go to work. And if only there was something that would happen at work where I would make a bunch of money in one day, like, I don't know, like maybe I could kill like 6 androids in one day. That would be cool. And then he goes to work and they're like, hey, we need you to kill 6 androids in one day. And he's like, oh, okay, that sounds perfect. And so then we cut to this guy, JR, who's basically a sad sack. And I wouldn't necessarily call him a sad sack. I think he's a little on the spectrum. And that's fine. He's like doing the best he can. He lives alone in an abandoned hotel or apartment building. And the loneliness gets to him if he doesn't have the TV on or the radio on. And it's really kind of compelling and sad that there's this guy with mental illness who thinks that he is stupid because the government tells him he is stupid, even though he's clearly not stupid. And that there's a sort of there's a comedy to this character, because when we're in his thoughts, he's using like grand words. His expression of emotion and feelings about the world around him are very concise, very clear. This guy is obviously not an idiot, but the world views him as an idiot because he in my opinion is a little bit on the he's got a little bit of the Asperger's,
and he'll never be allowed off Earth. And
yeah, it's punitive. Having mental illness is punitive. But that also, like, there's a great parallel to the punitive nature of being an android, to being a replicant. So he's like, oh, I love Mercerism. Even though I get hit with rocks every once in a while, I feel like I'm part of a community. This is great. And then I have a job, so I'm not useless. And then we go back to Rick, and Rick's like, oh, shit, so my boss got shot, and now I'm the boss. Cool. So there's a great scene where he goes to the Seattle office of Rosen. Is it Rosen Enterprises? Rosen, doesn't matter. He goes to the office, and he's like, I got to give tests. And they're like, oh, you got to give the test to Rachel first. And he's like, fine, whatever. I don't give a shit. I'll do whatever. And he's like, all right, you're you're an android. And she's like, ha ha, no, I'm not. And then he's like, all right, sure, you're not. Oh, wait, but you are. And she's like, ha, oh, wait, I am. Oh, shit. And so then he goes and he kills a couple people, and then he is arrested. Rick is arrested, sent to a fake police office. What do they call it in that? Like a Hall of Justice. He is sent to the fake Hall of Justice, which is full of androids. And he says, you're an android, you're probably an android. And he meets this really cool guy who, in my opinion, should have been the main character, Phil Resch, because he's frankly a lot more interesting than Rick Deckard.
He had my favorite scene, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. So Resch is like, I kind of figured like all you motherfuckers were fucking androids the whole time. Like, this shit does not surprise me in any way, shape, or form. Right away, he says, you're arrested and you claim to be a bounty hunter? Yeah, you're real. My boss is a fake bastard. I'll be right back. And then he comes back and they're like, oh, see, like your boss is a fake bastard. And then they go kill some opera chick. And Rick feels bad because reasons. I mean, like, oh, she could sing, therefore she has value. Oh,
his motivations are not clear, but we'll get into it.
Right. So then Rick's like, all right, I have to give you the test because your android boss said you're an android. And Phil's like, fine, give me the fucking test. If I'm an android, I know how to commit suicide. I don't need a gun or anything like that. I'll just hold my breath till I turn blue. And but turns out Phil's human, and this creates a crisis with Rick where he's like, oh, wait, Phil's kind of a piece of shit, but he's also human. But then there was this girl who was an android, but she was like super cool. So am I defending humanity or am I defending something artificial? So he's stuck in this quandary for the rest of the book. Meanwhile, our guy JR meets Pris, and Pris is a bitch. She's a straight up fucking elitist bitch. Here's the thing, is that everything sort of hinges on comparisons to the movie. And I want to make these characters their own for the book, but it's really hard to separate some of them from their movie counterparts. Like, Pris is probably the hardest for me to separate the movie Pris from the book Pris.
Roy Batty was the hardest for me.
Yeah, but I'm sure everyone has this problem with one or another of the characters. Except for Iran, because she's not in the book. Or not in the movie. So.
Well, here's the thing, and I wanted to briefly discuss this, not to interrupt Larry's breakdown. I had to keep telling myself, not Blade Runner, not Blade Runner, not Blade Runner. So I've done a lot of work to un-Ridley Scott world my brain when reading this book.
Yeah, it was very hard to do.
It was, but I think it was successful. Anyway, let's get through it. Continue.
Yeah. So he meets Pris, and he's like, oh, finally, I have a human. And then in a tragic scene, he works as a driver for a fake pet company, a fake vet. He works for a fake vet, and he gets a real cat. And he's looking for the compartment to fix the cat, but a real cat doesn't have a compartment. And he gets to the office, and his boss is a dick about it, but an understandable dick about it. He's like, I need this guy to understand, like, real animals from fake animals, which to me is very much an Asperger's thing. My niece has Asperger's, and she is very much, if it's animal-like, it's an animal. if it's a stuffed animal, it's an animal. Treat it like you would any animal. So it makes sense to me that he was like, oh, whether it's fake or real, it's the same thing. And it works for people as well. When he meets the rest of the androids, he's like, the Nexus 6s, he's like, oh, it doesn't matter if they're real or fake. They're people. So anyway, his boss is like, use the phone, call the people, tell them their cat's dead. He does. He's like, oh, it's sad. I can't really do it. I hate the phone. I understand that. Hating the phone is one of my main things. And then, so his buddy at work is like, I'll do it, and blah, blah, blah. And then he gets back home, and he meets the people, and he's like, oh, I don't care. I have friends now, and I'm special, and I'm good, and I'm happy. And then his friends are creepy as fuck. Like, these androids are creepy as creepy can be. They're like sort of people, sort of they're like psychopathic, or is it psychopathic or sociopathic? I think they're psychopathic more than sociopathic, because I don't believe they could function in society because they're just too fucking off. But Isidore is like, all right, we're a big happy family. And then the androids watch the TV show about the dude who's also an android, but we knew this basically without being told the whole time. Can't remember what's the TV guy? Buster Friendly. Buster Friendly and his friendly friends. So Buster, there's a power struggle, sort of a religious power struggle between the television and religion, between Buster and Mercerism, which is manifest in the scene where Buster's like, look, I told you Mercerism was fake. And he's like, look, it's the Truman Show. And you knew it the whole time, but you didn't want to know it. And it totally blows JR's mind. Meanwhile, Pris is pulling the fucking legs off a spider like some psycho. And then we have Rick is caught in a conundrum no modern person would be caught in, where they're like, where he's like, oh, I'm so torn between fucking something fake and love. But he's like, all right, I'll give fake a shot and see what happens. He almost doesn't bang Rachel, but then he does. People have gotten venereal diseases from real dolls these days because they're passed around so often. That's real life. That's real life, people. Wait. The fleshlight is a real thing.
Who's out there sharing their real dolls? Hey,
it was on a Navy ship.
I got laid off because of COVID, so I'm renting out my real doll.
To be fair, it was on a Navy ship where a bunch of guys got.
Oh.
Yeah, they all got the clap or something from.
You're supposed to put that in PKD News.
This was a long time ago, but anyway, so
things I did not want to learn on this episode.
Having sex with not real things is not a real problem these days. Fleshlights, rabbits, dildos, everybody's fucking things that are fake. Anyway, so they bang.
Langhorne JT.
To clarify, Larry is talking about the masturbation device A Rabbit, not actual rabbits.
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that before the internet comes from. Okay,
yeah,
carry
not
on.
Not the mammal. Anyway, so then Rachel tells him, yeah, I've done this like 100 times. You're not the first bounty hunter I've banged, and you're not the first to react like this. You won't be the last. Unless you kill me. Are you going to kill me? No, of course you're not, because you follow the same pattern every other fucking human follows. You do the same shit. And you think we're so much the same. Anyway, so Rachel goes and kills his goat that he got that day for some reason. And then Rick goes and he kills the rest of the androids pretty swiftly, but with some divine intervention from Mercer. And then he goes and off on his own, grabs a fake toad, goes home. His wife's like, I'm glad I got him that toad. And the end.
Going to be the title of the book.
And the end. That's it.
All right. So, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Yes. The elephant in the room is the movie Blade Runner. And we should say that it's impossible to talk about this book without talking a little bit of the comparisons with Blade Runner, but we're going to
do a full episode.
I disagree. I think we can do it and then discuss the comparisons for the movie when we do
in that episode.
I think it's easier than we want
to do.
Yeah, we can. Let's take a moment and just try to pull Blade Runner out of our brains and put it in a little empathy box, and let's talk about this book.
Although
science fiction book.
Just let me say this: that
Digital Noah's
Sean Young in Blade Runner is like one of the hottest things of my entire life. Like that's.
Come on.
She is.
What?
She is like number one crush when I was a 12-year-old boy. So it's hard for me to separate Rachel from Sean Young. And even more than Pris, and that was hard enough just character-wise.
I was more of a Pris guy growing up, but yeah.
But still, it's like there's. I think what David's saying is it's so ingrained that. Like, it's bound to come up, but we're going to do our best.
I know, but that's what makes trying to discuss this book a little more fun.
We're going to do our best to separate entirely the book from the movie so we can discuss the movie in the next episode.
That's right, Grandpa, so let's do this. Book time. Time.
So the structure that I want to talk about is to go down some of the themes one at a time. And the first theme, of course, is what is humanity and empathy and the message of empathy. There's a Kim Stanley Robinson quote.
KSR number 1. Okay, what does Kim Stanley Robinson sound like?
Very serious.
Dead-ass serious.
Did you say badass serious?
Dead-ass.
Dead-ass serious. Okay. Definitions of humanity become more and more difficult until in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, it takes a complex psychological test to determine who is human and who is machine. The interpretation of artificial and natural is complete. Cars and doors and stoves argue with or advise their owners, while artificial humans can love and fight for their survival. The humans in these landscapes lose contact with reality in any number of ways, withdrawing into one-dimensional mechanical relations to the world, or using machines to help them fight such reification. Did I say that word right?
He's talking about Philip K. Dick novels in general.
The larger role Dick assigns to artificial humans in the second half of the 1960s is, once again, the result of factors both artistic and social. The complications of this natural-artificial interpretation give opportunities for a whole range of thought experiments, exploring and displaying the motif. At the same time, every one of them is a dark image of representation of what Dick felt were dark times. Was that good for serious, Larry?
Yeah. No, I loved it.
So on page 29 of this edition, the Voight-Kampff empathy test has emerged as a criteria of which to judge an android, no matter how gifted as to pure intellectual capacity, could make no sense of the fusion that took place routinely among the followers of Mercerism. So the idea being that the test is to find that androids just can't have empathy on that level, and is the idea with the test. And it's interesting because the idea of animal rights gets like in here, and me being the animal rights person, of course, I like that all the Voight-Kampff questions are about eating lobster or, eating dog, all that stuff. And some of the interesting complications.
Yeah, I thought of you when I was reading it this time. I was like, oh, man, David would do well on this test.
That's why I said I think I'm the only one that would pass it.
I'd fail the void comp test so hard.
I would fail it.
I'd jettison my ass out immediately.
Yeah,
I mean, how does the dog taste? Is it good? I mean,
what's the context? Am I poor and living on the street and I haven't eaten for 2 weeks? Because then I'm going to.
Am I in a foreign country where this is acceptable, and if I don't eat it, it's rude? So
yeah, see, there's too many ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the void comp test is.
We'd be all luba all over the place.
What I like about.
I'm a real Phil Resch, okay?
What I think is cool about what Dick is doing with the parallel ideas of Mercerism and the void comp test is that he's setting up this parallel between, you've got, and this comes back to the world building. After World War Terminus, and where animals and the environment has become so scarce, everyone's just basically leaving Earth because, Earth is unlivable. One thing that I wish this novel had was more world building, more...
Yeah.
The exterior, and in fact,
there's almost none. I mean, other than it being dusty and you can't see the sky, you really don't get a sense of anything other than it's abandoned.
In some respects, I respect the economy of the world building because I do think that it's enough that
it's not enough. It's not enough.
Well, it worked for me, but I think he could have done more. But in the sense that there was enough that I could live with.
I agree that it's workable. But I would have loved to know the specifics of how this world works instead of having to fill in with the movie.
Well, I'm going to pose this question because we are discussing the world building, and this plays into that. What is the difference between somebody like John Isidore, Deckard, and the replicants that have escaped from Mars to Earth and are hiding in plain sight? If Earth is supposed to be seen as kind of this punishment, then why is Deckard stuck here with all these other kind of miscreants or people who are seen?
Well, Deckard says it in the beginning of the book. He says it's his duty to stay.
So there are people
and protect the people that are still there.
The people that they don't like.
Well, no, it's not punitive. It's not like Escape from New York or anything. They're just people that haven't. They're just people that haven't left yet.
Okay.
Well, and it has to do with his Mercerism too, because when they tie into the mood organ, it sets up the whole thing of that. It's this great honor to be able to raise an animal, to be able to keep an animal alive, and you're doing your part. So let's talk about this world building for a little bit, because one of the things on the very first page, I think that obviously the first and most important thing, kind of on the nose, is Iran saying. Or when Deckard says, "I'm not a cop," and she says, "You're worse. You're a murderer hired by cops."
Thank you, wife.
And he's like, "I never killed anyone in my life."
Well, that's payback for him being an ass and trying to set her mood organ to where he wants it to be.
I love his he wants to set her mood to "my husband is awesome."
You have set mood organ to "my husband is great."
Right, and I like the whole she schedules the self-loathing,
twice a month or something like.
I don't need mood organ to schedule that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for those of us who do have depression, as I know Larry does, we don't have to schedule it. It's just there.
Yeah, it just happens.
Right. Well, and
I mean, if I had a mood organ, I'd set that thing to ecstasy constantly.
I knew it. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Well,
oh no, I've had too much ecstasy. No.
So the next real big, strong piece of world building, the mention of World War Terminus, which, by the way, is a great name. And that's one of the reasons why you want to know more about it, because you're like, oh, that sounds insane. And so the line on page 8 is, the legacy of World War Terminus is diminished in potency. Those who could not survive the dust.
In potency.
Those who could not survive the dust have passed into oblivion years ago, and the dust, weaker now, confronting the strong survivors, only deranged minds and genetic properties. So, and then he talks about his lead cod piece, his like gas mask, which
the cod piece, I love that. It only comes up in the beginning of the book, but it comes up like 3 times. Cod pieces.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be. They're like lead cod pieces, which doesn't sound safe, but
protect those genitals, but not really.
So I do think that this first chapter is incredible for the world building and for setting the stage, and the whole idea of how animals are venerated, the discussion with the neighbor about, like his pregnant horse and all that. It does really do a good job. And the next, page 27.
I also like the keeping up with the Joneses aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like his self-loathing for having an electric sheep is devastating,
Right. And so the next, there's some world building about the colony on page 16, but it's not till page 27 that we get the introduction of the Nexus Sixes. On page 27, it must have been one of those new extra clever Andes the Rosen Association is turning out. Miss Marston said, this is at the cop shop still. Did you read over the company's brochure and spec sheets? The Nexus 6 brain unit they're using now is capable of selecting within a field of 2 trillion constituents and 10 million separate neural pathways. So this is a really good introduction to the Nexus 6 because of the details on that. It's from the cop shop, which I like. There's a little bit of cop shop talk, which of course is something that Anthony and I are both fans of cop shop talk in general.
Well, another thing that sets up the Nexus Sixes, and I forgot to note it, so I'm not sure what page it's on, but when they give Deckard the assignment that the previous what are they that the previous bounty hunter had, they
John
Roy in prison.
John, right?
Holden?
Go ahead, David.
Holden? Are you talking about Holden, his boss?
I'm talking about the bounty hunter that gets put in the hospital by Batty.
I'm trying to find his name.
Which does set up that these androids are dangerous. It's unfortunate that they're dispatched rather quickly at the end of the book, and we never get that any sense of danger because Deckard is a superhero.
Yeah, right. I was a little let down by that.
So once the test stuff comes up, we have the awesome scene where he finally gives the test to Rachel, and I think this is a pretty good moment. And there is some world building there because the whole detail that she tries to give that the reason I'm not doing well in the test is because I grew up on a spaceship between Mars and Earth, and then I wasn't around humans was a really good world building detail on the
right.
Salander 3 was the name of the ship, and
it comes up again, which I really liked.
Yeah, and that's and it even says here. Then, as you know, the ship turned back a sixth of the way to Proxima, which means that there's interstellar travel here too, not just Mars going on. That's hinted at, and that's no different from the movie where we're just hinting at these other worlds,
yeah.
But. I like that. So the idea is that the Rosen Association is trying to trick Deckard. They're trying to see if the Nexus Sixes will pass or not. They try to convince him. It doesn't work. But one detail
that to me is important is that even though she fails the test, they don't just give up.
Yeah,
they have a set plan for after the test fails.
Which leads to, on page 55, a really cool detail and a great reveal where he thought she keeps calling the owl it when Deckard, that was a really good...
That was the tell that he knew.
Yeah. That, which is funny because humans, Carrie and I get mad all the time because people call their dogs it all the time. Yeah, and it's really irritating. If I don't know,
it is.
If I don't know if a dog is a he or a she, I'll just guess and I'll be fine with being wrong.
Yeah.
Rather than to say it, because it's so. Because I'm not going to fail the body comp test. Right. It's interesting here because on page 57, there's a really key moment, and it's really important, is when Eldon Rosen tells Rachel not to be afraid of him because you're not an escaped android here illegally. You're a property of the Rosen Association.
But here's the thing. Is this... She's done this 9 times before.
Right.
So is this a rote script? Do they know what's going to happen this whole time? He obviously did not do anything different than they expected.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I do think that the key there in the comparisons to the dehumanization. Well, first of all, there's lots of themes that Dick is unintentionally
or intentionally.
Yeah, intentionally or unintentionally hitting on. Slavery, dehumanization of immigrants, obviously unintentionally because this was way before his time, but the Black Lives Matter. He's dealing with all these issues, but so much of it comes into this one line where Eldon says, it's okay, you're property of this corporation and he can't retire you. Yeah, and so that's the next theme that I have a lot of things about is the confusing ethics of Andes. And like how it goes all over the place. But
well, first of all,
much like Deckard's decision making, it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. We should establish where we stand on alternative life, like androids.
Okay.
Personally, I could give a shit if a robot lives or dies. When I saw Ex Machina, there's also another movie or TV. Westworld. I did not give a shit whether those robots lived or died. They're robots. Who gives a shit? But where do you stand on that? Is that life?
Well, see, that's the thing.
Does that have value?
That's the thing is that it's, I think, a little different in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep because they are so lifelike. Because the idea.
Hold on, David. Answer the question though. From a non-Do Androids perspective, what is your opinion on what Larry's saying?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a general question.
Yeah.
No, I mean, a machine is a machine, and
life is life.
Yeah, and I would always, and just like I think people who ascribe ethical anything to property, over life, we're seeing a lot of that in the news right now because people are upset that, cities are...
Somebody burns a Target. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, somebody burns a Target, but George Floyd had his neck stepped on for 8 minutes. Like, I don't give a shit about the Target. I care about the person who had 8 minutes with the knee in their neck.
Yeah.
And in that sense, too, like, I think in this scenario, if you're talking about a machine and it is clearly, especially a machine that does not have the ability to develop, life, because look at the AI that we were talking about earlier with the Philip K. Dick AI. I don't care about the ethics of the Philip K. Dick AI because it's not. It's a program, right? Yeah. But the difference in this novel is that it's artificial life, and the reason why they're so close to humans and where you need a test is because they have so well mimicked life with the Nexus 6. It becomes a different issue, and that's where the gray area happens. And that's why I think the parallel of the Mercerism...
Here's the thing, is that Deckard has this this issue all of a sudden in the middle of the book after they kill Luba, where he's like, oh, I don't know how I feel about them, whether they're human or not. But he totally omits the fact that they know they're fake.
But they don't.
No, they do. They do.
There are some androids who have to get told that they're androids.
But Luba pretended that she didn't know she was fake. But she absolutely knew.
But Deckard tells Rachel she's fake.
Yeah. But that's not my point here. Well,
hold on. I'm going to answer your question.
He has empathy for Luba for some reason, even though because he sees humanity in her, but he's omitting the fact that she knowingly integrated herself into humanity under fake pretenses, false pretenses. So he's being empathic about a falsehood. So it doesn't track. It doesn't make sense to omit the falsehood when you're like it's sort of like an idolatry thing. It's like a hero worship where he's or like a religion where you just totally disregard any bad thing about them and you just believe the good. Like you're following Tom Baker or Jimmy Swaggart or something, and you're like, oh, fuck hookers, that's okay because you believe in God and you're forgiven. It's okay. That's how it feels to me.
Well, to answer your question, to walk it back to your original question, I'm in the same boat. However, I would prefer to spend my time with androids.
There's a Kim Stanley Robinson quote number 2.
I'm not sure, Anthony. I go both ways. I mean, I kind of vacillate between, like, I love that androids don't give a shit about certain things.
I just don't like.
Sure as fuck do not want to sit around while someone pulls the fucking legs out of a spider. So.
Yeah, I get it. I just really don't like people most days.
Yeah.
Anyway, David, you were saying something?
Well, for one thing, onto the spider thing, I think one of the things that Phil is doing here with the androids is he's showing that some of them, because they're machines, they just don't have the empathy, so they just don't care.
No, they don't understand. There is nothing wrong with experimenting just to see what happens.
I just want to see what happens to this spider.
They're just curious little robots.
I mean, but that's us as kids. And I think all of us have done that as kids. Like, what would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? There's a disconnect between empathy and curiosity.
And so there's a Kim Stanley Robinson quote, Anthony.
You don't have a comment on that?
Well, I think
I was hoping for a comment from David on empathy versus curiosity.
Well, obviously, it's something that you grow out of. Like, I do think young kids do stupid.
Grow out of or grow into empathy?
They grow, yeah, I mean, I think.
Grow out of curiosity into empathy. Hopefully.
And it also depends on how you're raised. If you're raised, like, for example, with ethical, militant vegan parents, you're probably not going to do a lot of the things that other kids would do in those scenarios.
Or are you going to do them more? I mean, that's...
When you hit your rebellious teen phase, I don't know, the people who don't grow out of that sometimes end up, they have heads in their freezers. Not always, but sometimes.
Well, most of the...
Well, that's the religious thing we saw in the, in the 50s and 60s was all those hardcore religious people being raised by all these hardcore religious people ended up being serial killers. Because they were...
Most people that I know that have been raised, most kids that I know that have been raised vegan stick to it. I know one that's super rebellious, but other than that, like,
well, I don't know anyone that was raised vegan. So
okay, well, because of my circles, I know a lot.
Sure.
But I think I don't know. Anyways, the Kim Stanley Robinson quote is about the depiction of androids.
Hard. Well, I was going to say, Larry, more to your point, a lot of the kids who are grown, yeah, like they're grown in a vat with crosses on the front of it. But a lot of people I've met who've grown up in a very religious household, they go one of two ways. They either rebel really hard or against it, or they get way too into it. Either way, they're fucking weird.
They're not great.
Either way, they're just weird. Okay, so this Kim Stanley Robinson quote, too. Let me get my serious voice in there.
Serious.
Certainly, the novel is contradictory in its depiction of the androids, and just as certainly, this is deliberate on Dick's part. In different portions of the text, the reader is forced to regard the androids in different ways, as victim or as menace. This change can be effected within the space of a paragraph, but more typically, it shifts scene by scene to allow the reader to develop a set opinion of the androids, which then clashes with the image presented in later scenes. There are countless shifts of this sort in the course of a reading of the novel. There is a symmetrical contradiction in the novel's portrayal of the human characters. Humans are in turn sympathetic and vicious. John Isidore, the feeble-minded protagonist of the subplot, is tormented first by his human boss, then by androids he has befriended. It makes little difference to him what the biological nature of the tormentors is. Rick Deckard, in his hunt for androids, becomes confused in the same way that readers do. Well, that makes sense to me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I think...
Although I will say, Kim... feeble-minded, really? It's a little shallow.
This was his,
He didn't say the R word.
This was his graduation paper in the early 80s. He might not have used it now. But
He didn't march in there, Larry, and be like, well, that fucking kid's got too much water in his brain pan.
Did you guys actually regard JR as feeble-minded? I thought that was a huge joke.
No, I think I think the whole idea that he's called special is that he is supposed to be
like the IQ thing just doesn't make sense.
I mostly just found him annoying.
Well, that's fair.
Be my friend.
Right? But that was the thing. He was childlike, naive, not stupid.
Yeah, he's naive. He's not dumb. He's naive.
Yeah, and the fact that that's equated to IQ in this world was I think a joke on PKD's part.
So the question is, what Kim Stanley Robinson's talking about there, is it genius or accident? Was Phil doing this on purpose to try and make us like teeter-totter in our views towards the androids, or was he just like so hopped up on pills he didn't remember what he was doing? From one scene to the next.
Does it matter?
It doesn't matter, I guess, in the end. And my personal feeling is I think it was genius. I think he was doing it on purpose. I think he was. I think it's clear.
Well, obviously, the spark was there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the thing. I mean, that's
true.
It doesn't make sense otherwise.
But considering that we've seen so many confusing books that he's written in the past, The Game Player's the Titan, the things like that, where like he was fumbling ideas from one chapter to the next. We have seen that. So
I feel like this one was much clearer.
I agree.
And it might just be it fit in more with the way I interpret things. But to me, I understood the questions that were being asked. I understood the way they were answered. I wasn't satisfied with the way they were answered.
No, it's
Mercer showing up in the middle of the apartment just didn't.
It's a consistent narrative, but the character's thoughts and motivations flip-flop so much
at times,
that I felt that wasn't intentional. So I think there's a consistency in the narrative itself, but for character motivations, character thoughts, character actions, it's like 20 seconds ago you said, I'm going to kill you. Now you've had this immediate epiphany as you're over here. He's like, okay, now I'm not going to kill you. You need to pick.
I wouldn't call it an immediate epiphany. I would call it a convenient epiphany.
Okay, fine. A plot device epiphany.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Exactly is what it is.
Okay.
It plays too much to the plot devices.
Speaking of, I want to talk about one of my favorite scenes as far as the writing goes of this book, and one of the what I think is one of the coolest reveals. And and this gets to something that you were talking about earlier, Larry, which is Phil Resch, and how good of a character he is.
Yeah.
My favorite scene in the whole book, page 126 in my edition. Maybe Garland lied. I think he did. False memories just aren't that good. What about my squirrel? Yes, your squirrel. I forgot about your squirrel. And then Phil says, if I'm an Andy and you kill me, you can have my squirrel. Here, I'll write it out. I'm willing it to you. Andys can't will anything. They can't possess anything to will. Then just take it, Phil says. This scene, that little moment, I fucking love because...
Oh, yeah.
Because it gets so to the heart of the whole what is reality, and like because he doesn't even know if he is an android or not at that point. He's questioning it all, but it's clear that he's not an android because he's saying like, "Hey, I've got a squirrel and I want you to take care of it." If he was an android, would he give a shit about the squirrel?
I mean, this is basically the Matrix right there. That just that scene like became 3 movies.
Yeah.
You know, because
Dark City.
Like Dark City. You just don't know. The 13th floor. If you're in a world where it's possible for memories to be implanted into you and for you to believe those memories, like how would you react as a human as opposed to an android?
Right. Yeah, like, could it be a simulation?
That's several levels of contemplation right there.
Right. And so to me, it was funny because that in this particular reading, my third reading of the book, that was my favorite scene. I don't think I ever noticed that scene before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And when I was on that.
No, everything with Phil is kind of my favorite.
Yeah.
Like that character really put into focus everything I think Dick wanted to say about the book.
Yeah, and I brought up
interesting character. He's way more complex than
Deckard. But he's supposed to be because, like Deckard says after he has sex with Rachel, is that, oh wait, Phil went through this already. I'm just experiencing what that guy already did.
Yeah.
So I'm following in the footsteps of someone that's already been there.
And that whole scene with Rachel is page 178 of my edition.
Oh, the sex scene?
Yeah, and the I'm not alive. You're not going to bed with a woman. Don't be disappointed, okay? Have you ever made love to an android before? And it's funny because this is the whole, it's not cheating if it's an android.
It's an android.
Like, which I think if they're lifelike, I don't know. I definitely don't agree with that.
Is that when he says Rachel has breasts that smile?
Well,
describing her body as childlike.
Got that out of my memory.
When he says the childlike, her childlike features ended at her eyes, which is sort of like a creepy Taxi Driver kind of thing. Like what's her face's character in Taxi Driver?
Oh, Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster's character. That's kind of like the description of Jodie Foster's character in Taxi Driver, is that she is very much a child up until you see the age in her eyes.
Yeah, that's
wow, it's got real depressing all of a sudden.
Yeah, creepy.
Yeah, it's really creepy.
Well, here's the thing, is that I think in a global view of Phil K. Dick, he was not well-versed in women or in sex.
Yeah.
I think...
Larry,
today
they're going to at you.
That's fine. Today, he would be considered not just a prude, but almost like a religious zealot when it comes to sex. Like he pretty much married everyone he had sex with. That was his thing.
Yeah.
And when
Got nothing to add to this.
When you read his writing, when he describes sex, it's very much from a naive point of view, from a love-making point of view.
That's true. So you're saying Dick is a man who only made love, but never fucked.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
I just wish he wouldn't use things like childlike when he's describing bodies, or spending too much time talking about the young couple. Like,
I think in the time
puppets.
In that time, he was just, as a man of his time, it was describing innocence, not.
Okay. I understand.
Not child pornography.
I understand
you know what I mean
when you say that. Yes.
Yeah.
It still sounds weird to me.
It's still, yeah, to me too. It just is. It doesn't sound right.
All right, let's have the Mercerism argument.
Yeah,
I'm watching David sit in his seat. Like, can they please stop talking about this? That's the body language he's giving me right now.
So it's Mercerism against television. So religion versus television, right? Is the basic argument.
Yes, and I think, one of the things when I was talking to Lisa and her crew at Georgia Tech, we were talking about the empathy boxes and how, like right now in our current political climate, we have a narcissist sociopath as a president who's constantly on the screen, like dismissing 200,000 deaths of a disease that he eventually got, which is hilarious. But when you put that into the context and you think about the empathy box and the whole idea that you would have to like grab two handles of this thing to make you feel, but I like the idea that it's the opposite, where the world is so destroyed that this guy has risen to popularity because you can plug into a VR and you can see his struggle to get people to care about the world. The reason why I like the Mercer stuff is not just because it like has animal rights connotations in it, which obviously I like. At its base level, yeah. But at the base level, but what I like about what it says about Philip K. Dick here is, and how it relates to what we're getting in the greater oeuvre of Philip K. Dick's career, is that this is Philip K. Dick at the heart of ideas, where he's exploring greater issues through like a totally weird sci-fi concept.
This is a hippie thing, right? It's like a love-in with pain. There is no love without pain, is what he's saying.
And what he's also trying to say, the other parallel that's working here that I think gets past a lot of readers, is that eventually Deckard is out there testing androids to see if they feel, but in the first chapter of the book, he's using a machine to make sure he has the feelings that he wants.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the parallel of like humans can't even like control their feelings correctly, and then this guy who has to dial up a machine to get his feelings is going to go out and kill these other beings that want to live, want to survive,
but they don't feel. Exactly. And their rejection of Mercerism is exactly why he should kill them.
And that's the contradictory level. But that's what I'm talking about is the genius of this book, is because it's not that there's like huge gun battles and laser fights and cops and robbers stuff. And that's when we see that there's this quote from Stanislaw Lem that I have where he dismisses this book as cops and robbers stuff. And yeah, he does. And
really, Lem?
Lem. Yeah, do you want to read the quote?
Yeah, I got it.
Can you do a Polish voice?
No, I cannot. It'll just sound like a really bad Russian accent.
Yeah, right.
So here's a quote from my boy Stanislaw Lem, who wrote one of my favorite science fiction novels of all time, Solaris. We see the sad picture of an author who squanders his talent by using brilliant ideas and inspirations to keep up a game of cops and robbers.
Bullshit.
Harsh.
Wow, that's
in there. Harsh. He like dunked on PKD.
Yeah. And we know that
it's like exploring loneliness by sending people to space.
right.
Explorers is a better book than this.
Yeah, but that's not the comparison I would make. He wrote an entire book about his master's voice is the whole thing about people not being able to understand aliens. And, which I like the book, but like, what's the opposite? That we have an entire book that like
doesn't make sense.
That's all about we don't get it. Right? That's the whole point of his master's book.
I would read that book too.
I said it's a good book. I like it. It's just
Anthony.
Yes.
Fuck Lem.
You have an opinion that's different than mine? How dare you? That's fine. I get it. It's like when people tell me, Anthony, I don't like Mr. Bungle. I understand. I get
what?
it.
No, fuck those people.
I get
They're
it.
wrong.
It's
They're wrong.
okay to guys. I'm gonna drop this fucking truth bomb on you right now.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
You guys ready? It's okay to like different things.
I'm pro Lem.
What?
Pro Lem. I just disagree with him here. I just think he's full of shit.
No, David, you can't just disagree with someone one time. You have to hate everything they do forever.
Yeah, you either have to love everything someone does or you have to dislike everything someone does. You can't pick and choose based off of what works for you. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the thing, though. Basically, I do think that the Mercerism thing hits on, and I just want to reiterate this point, that this is what we signed up for Philip K. Dick, in my opinion. These are the ideas and these kinds of things. And to me, just completely separating, as on its own, Do Androids Dream, I think, is Philip K. Dick in the lane, in the zone, in the same kind of way that he was with Three Stigmata, Time Out of Joint. I know you guys didn't like Martian Time Slip, but I thought it was in there.
No, I think this one, I mean, despite its various flaws, and as Anthony points out, like the up and down of character motivations, this is an amazing book about ideas.
Yeah.
Like reflecting on, like, you can take the comparisons and you can do them, the parallels, the reversals, like you talk about all the time. Like the best novels are all about parallels and reversals. This entire book is parallels and reversals.
Absolutely. And that's,
it is almost perfect in that sense. Like it's almost an idiot savant's version of perfection.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why it will go over a lot of people's heads is a lot of the parallels and reversals are not obvious. They're very subtle, and they're done in ways like, if you're not thinking about the fact that he's tied up to the mood organ at the beginning and then he's killing people over their emotions later, that goes over a lot of people's heads. And it's obvious, and when you say it and you point it out to people who don't get it right away, then they're like, oh shit, I feel like an idiot for not getting it.
Right.
Which is...
Well, and if you're not seeing, like, at the most basic level, the relationship between Rachel and Rick being the same relationship between Pris and JR, that's, I mean, they're actually the same fucking character.
You are correct.
It's such an obvious thing, but like when you're reading it, unless you're looking for those parallels, unless you're looking for that, you're not going to see them as the same thing.
Right, and we do know that, this book sold very well, and it was nominated for a Nebula, so I think people saw that this was a good book. Unless you're Stanislaw Lem, then you just think it's cops and robbers.
I mean, honestly, when I initially read it, like coming away from initially reading it, I was like, pets, what the fuck? Who cares? Just show me the shooty bang bang. I mean, I was in high school, so
The emergency buttons, and which it
yeah,
does.
I've
Emergency button is awesome.
loved all the cops and robbers stuff.
Yeah.
Like this kind of cool detective, like tracking down these people that were obviously bad guys and taking them down. That made sense to me. But the pet stuff, the Mercerism made no sense. I didn't care in high school.
Mhm.
Even though I was into religion, I didn't see this as part of that. I didn't tie it into, oh, this is sort of like, talking about media and religion and how they're opposed and all that stuff. I didn't see it.
Now I don't remember if it was,
Now I see all those things.
and I'm not sure if it was Deckard or Iran, but one of them decides, I think it's Deckard, decides not to use a mood organ at the end, and then, and that's an obvious sign that's the neon sign flashing arc, at the end. But
At the end, Deckard pulls his wife away and uses the mood organ instead of her, gets hit in the ear, then goes and kills all the bad guys.
Now, I remember early in the podcast when we did the PKD news story about the fact that the city of Chicago was doing this as the one city, one book.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, like, there was a reaction by some people in Chicago who were like, why are we reading this book? What does this have to say about our life? And it's really funny because I think, especially considering what's going on with the Breonna Taylor killing in Louisville and George Floyd, is that this book is very much about overreaching policing and sociopathic lack of empathy with our cops. And
that's one of the things I wasn't thinking about when I read this.
The first time when you were a teenager, yeah.
No. Now.
Oh, you didn't say? I thought about it a lot. Reading.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony, were you?
I didn't, and I'll tell you why I didn't think about it. Because if Deckard lacks all this empathy that a lot of cops do, but he's working against the Andes who also lack empathy, you're not giving me any reason to feel that.
Yeah, this is not Breonna Taylor.
That tension between poor folks who are underclass, who are not white, who are basically living under the boot of a borderline like Nazi regime. You're just, I'm watching two people who are unfeeling butt heads.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying it's.
But I understand what you're saying, David. But yeah. I respect.
I don't see it. At least I didn't see it when I was reading it.
I don't think it's a one-to-one. But I do think that the issue, like when there's a line where he's talking to Iran and he says, like, I'm only killing killers, and
I mean, there's parallels with referring to them as it, like
hold on, I
those kinds of things.
Hold on, everybody, just hold on to your pants. I got.
Apparently, we're holding on.
Well, it's because it's because Deckard falls back on Mercerism that he's able to get it in his head that what he's doing is killing killers, not killing people. So I understand what you mean from that regard, David. But the characters, for me, the androids are not set up in a way where I would feel like the police force is overstepping its reach.
Where you would actually feel empathy for them.
Well, I would have to in order to have that point. I understand what David's saying. I just don't necessarily get to it. But Deckard falls back on the whole Mercerism thing when we get to it's page 30. Page 29 to 30 in chapter 3 in my book. And I highlighted this because I did think it was a pretty straightforward breakdown of how Deckard views the androids he hunts down. Bear with me; it's a bit of a long passage.
Go for it.
So,
Go.
Evidently, the humanoid robot constituted a solitary predator. Rick liked to think of them that way. It made his job palatable. In retiring, i.e. killing, and Andy, he did not violate the rule of life laid down by Mercer. You shall kill only killers, Mercer had told them the year empathy boxes first appeared on Earth. And in Mercerism, as it evolved into a full theology, the concept of the killers had grown insidiously. In Mercerism, an absolute evil plucked at the threadbare cloak of the tottering, ascending old man, but it was never clear who or what this evil presence was. A Mercerite sensed evil without understanding it. Put another way, a Mercerite was free to locate the nebulous presence of the killers wherever he saw fit. For Rick Deckard, an escaped humanoid robot which had killed its master, which had been equipped with an intelligence greater than that of many human beings, which had no regard for animals, which possessed no ability to feel empathic joy for another life form's success or grief at its defeat. That, for him, epitomized the killers.
Yeah.
And that breaks it down for me, which is why I'm kind of unable to see it from the perspective that David is talking about. Sorry. I get on a soapbox, but I thought that was worth mentioning.
They're not victims.
Correct.
I mean, the point is that we're never told what they did on Mars. We're never told, like, it's hinted at that they did some fucked up things, like Roy Batty's plan when they were escaping was fucked up. Like, it killed people in weird ways, but we're never told explicitly what they did.
Right.
So comparing it to victims of police brutality is hard for me.
No, I understand that.
Even though I can see the base comparison.
Right. And I'm not the only one to do that. There was an article in The Verge recently that did the same thing. And
oh, yeah.
I'll argue with them about it, too.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to...
At me, Verge.
I think it's easier to make that comparison with Blade Runner than it is with you.
Well, but here's something interesting, because this is very much the time we're living through, and it's a book that we're reading right now, but do you think that that's a little bit of a reach, only like we're looking for those examples where maybe they aren't always?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely are.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I read China Mountain Zhang during the first month of the pandemic, the book is like hugely about, it has a huge economic crash in it. And at that point, this was when everyone in the country was terrified that we were about to go off a cliff financially. And
right.
So if I read that book this month compared to that month, it would have been a very different read, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think if I, and you and I, Anthony, suffered on that because we had an agent reading Nightmare City right at the time when the George Floyd thing was happening. And our book is very much about these issues. So, that could happen. And
much like my comic that never got finished was talking about toxic masculinity before it was a thing.
Yeah, that happens. And I think, that's one of the cool things about this book is 50 years later, it's still relevant, and it has things.
I think the best books always are because we're talking about emotions and themes that are unique to us and that will always be unique to us in some regard.
And I think in 100 years, this book will still be relevant. It has none of those telling signs of the time kind of things that hold it back that a lot of other PKD books have, where he's just like, oh, and then the Negro did the thing, or anything like that. It doesn't feel dated. Yeah, in any way. I mean, the fact that they're not using cell phones doesn't matter, because it just doesn't. Like, the fact that computers aren't readily available doesn't matter. Like, all the modern conveniences we've gotten since then really don't seem to change this book in any way. Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting thing when those scenes kind of come up. And, when we just, on the other show, when we did the top 10 horror novels and we were talking about I Am Legend,
And I Am Legend is a book that doesn't feel dated, even though it was written in 1954.
Right.
Except for there's one line about the nuclear war of 1978, and it's so much more jarring because you don't feel like you're reading a book from the 50s through the majority of it. And so that one line just really takes you, it's really like, whoa, it's
right.
jarring.
I mean, even in this book, like the last World War is not defined by a number or a way, you know? It's just World War Terminus, the last World War.
Yeah, and I do love that it's called that. And, you know, every time I see that title, I'm like, oh, I want the book about World War Terminus.
Well, I think the best books leave that world building as set dressing and background, and they don't need to constantly bombard you with exposition and details in the way that something like the Song of Ice and Fire series does, where there's pages and pages of descriptions and back history and story, which I know is a fantasy trope, said the guy who barely reads fantasy and can't stand it. So I guess I'm biased in that regard. But my point is that the book says more with what it doesn't show than it does with what it does show, I think, in a lot of ways.
200%.
Yeah, so when I say I want to know more about the world that we're in, maybe it's better that it's not there, because it leaves so much more to the imagination.
Yes, but yes and no, right? Because like you might have wanted more of that, but for me, it helped me with that as the backdrop. It helped me focus more on what Deckard's doing in what Isidore's going through. It helped me focus more on characters, and I think that for once, Dick did kind of put character first. I don't think he did it the best way that he could have, but I think he was pushing the ideas and the characters before the whole, like, and then, you know, they ate dust for breakfast, you know, and stuff like that. Well, real quick, while David's thinking about this, I actually, one of my good friends and older writing mentors actually loaned me these, which is Boom Studios did a graphic novel of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Oh, really?
Actually is not a Blade Runner adaptation.
No, it's almost word for word. It has the entire text of the...
Got John Isidore, and I haven't read these yet, but I plan to, because it actually... have you read these, David?
Yeah, I did several years ago. It's... Warren Ellis, I think, did the adaptation, but I think. But
yes, you are correct. It's Warren Ellis and Matt Fraction.
Nice.
All right, so I'm going to give this book 5 out of 5 electric squirrels, and I think.
But the squirrel was real.
Yeah, but I have an electric squirrel because I don't have the money for it. And
makes sense.
And well, because I gotta have 5 of them, dude. How am I gonna afford 5 real squirrels? I gotta have 5 electric squirrels. Yeah, I think this is a masterpiece. I think it's right up there with Three Stigmata. I think and Valis and Scanner Darkly. I think it's one of his Man in the High Castle. I think it's one of his like really. Assured and
I mean this is pinnacle.
Yeah,
I mean this is a high point. Yeah,
he's firing on all cylinders. There's levels and layers that we could talk for another 2 hours and probably still get into some themes and things that we didn't think of before, and that's because this is really good shit, in my opinion. But yeah, 5 out of 5 for me. Langhorne.
Well, I'm not one to give perfect scores, so this one's definitely getting a strong 4.5 electric toads from me, because
you cut that toad in half.
Yeah, I'm cutting that toad in half. I mean, it can still eat flies or electric flies or whatever they're called in the book, like fake flies. It's not perfect because, like Anthony stated several times, the characters do occasionally like lack motivation. Their motivation comes out of the blue. But we're talking about a book that explores religion, media, what is humanity, the police, so many different subjects, and does it in a non-intrusive, preachy way that it's almost perfect. It's almost perfect.
Okay, Anthony.
This was a hard one, guys.
Go ahead, do your
hard
thing.
one, because I thought long and hard about this leading up to our discussion. And while I recognize that Dick is talking about a lot of interesting ideas, and in its own right, I think when it came out, it was probably groundbreaking for a lot of people to read these discussions. It's very theological. It's very much trying to discuss what's the difference between a human empathy and android empathy. But for me, the lack of character motivations and the fact that they so often contradict what they say towards the end of the book, and that the Nexus 6 are built up to be kind of like the real deal. Deckard dispatches them quickly. It feels not that I'm like out here hounding for some hard action, but
a little bit too easy.
What I am looking for is that we see that Deckard struggles with these human beings that are. I couldn't really get a handle on if Dick was doing what he set out to do because of a lot of that. Yeah. And I think the book does a lot good. Even though I had those struggles, it puts character first, it puts kind of the ideas first, and everything else is backdrop, and I like that, but it really falls apart towards the
narrative end. Is strong. Narrative,
up until the end, but even for me, when I was reading it, I found that it also went 2 chapters longer than it really needed to be.
Right.
And in my notes here, and
the Deus Machina, Ex Machina, whatever you want to call it,
right?
With Mercer showing up on the stairs, like, bitches behind you, dude.
And he has a vision. And it's like, oh, hey, God helped me out. It kind of reminded me of when people, surgeons or anyone is like, I did this hard task. Must have been God in the room. No, you asshole. You did it yourself.
Right.
But I really think that I would have endings make a big impact on me, and they really do dictate how much I love a book. I that might sound arbitrary to people, but
no. And this one lasted way too long.
I feel like it went a few chapters over, but I thought
30 pages.
I really
30
like
pages.
On page 208 of my edition of my Kindle, where it's the end of this particular chapter, chapter 20, and Dick writes, once he thought I would have seen the stars, years ago, but now it's only the dust. No one has seen a star in years, at least not from Earth. Maybe I'll go where I can see stars, he said to himself as the car gained velocity and altitude. It headed away from San Francisco, toward the uninhabited desolation to the north, to the place where no living thing would go, not unless it felt that the end had come. And I thought the end. And I thought that would have been a beautiful way to cap off the story.
Yeah.
And so Deckard is out here doing the quote unquote the Lord's work or Mercer's work, and it would have kind of wrapped it up a little bit better and didn't kind of plod along, where I feel like all his discussions with Iran at the end I was like, why is this still happening? Why is this book still going on? Right. So for me, 3 Stigmata, this is not, which, as you know, is still my favorite Dick book. And this is not a lazy rating. I thought long and hard about this, but I'm going to give this book 3.5 lead cod pieces out of.
Nice. Nice.
I'm going 3.5, which I think is good.
Okay, so this month, our Dicklike Suggestions. Langhorne J. Tweed, do you want to go first?
I would love to go first. I love going first. First is my favorite thing, other than second or third. Well, you guys are going to love this because I know how much you guys like children.
Whoa! What?
So recently, I every once in a while, I want to watch a kid's show or some sort of clean, family-friendly entertainment, just so I can feel like maybe there's some hope for the world. And there never is, but you know. But I watched an episode of a show called Gordimer Gibbon's Life on Normal Street. And this is basically like, maybe if PKD were alive today, he might have, and wanted to do a children's show, this is the show he would have made. It's like, you guys are not going to know Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, but it's like Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, Friday the 13th, the series. And,
I know what that is, so...
Okay. So the story is there's this kid Gordimer and his two friends, and each episode they're confronted with like a magical object that changes life in some way for someone. So, for instance, the one I just watched is Gordimer gets a blazer when he's going shopping for school stuff that makes people respect him and treat him as an adult. But he's only 13, so he gets a job with the mayor. Hijinks ensues. Well, his friends want hijinks to ensue, but he's like, oh, no, I got to be serious now. I'm an adult. There's an episode where one of the characters builds a robot and feeds her personality into the robot, but the robot turns evil based on those personality traits. And so it's sort of, that one is very much the PKD episode for me, where it's she gives this robot life, but it abuses life and turns into a monster. So I recommend Gordimer Gibbon's Life on Normal Street for good, clean family fun with a PKD twist.
All right, Anthony Trevino.
No, I don't have any Dick-like recommendations this time around. I've been mostly reading horror and getting prepped for Halloween, so I got nothing right now.
Well,
none of those horror things reminded you of PKD in any way?
Not the stuff I've been reading.
Oh yeah,
honestly. So
all right,
yeah,
well, I got a horror novel for you.
Yep, me.
Yeah, in fact, you've already got it, and that's The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And this is an incredible horror novel. And
now, is the title a reference to The Only Good Indian is a Dead Indian?
Yes.
I'm plugging my ears because I don't want to know much about this.
Oh, I'm not gonna do.
It's spoiler free.
It's spoiler free. Don't worry. The only reason why it's PKD is very early on, but the thing that I think is most PKD about it, which is the inspiration that Stephen had for writing this book that one is very PKD in how it came to him, which was he was fixing a fan in his house, and he saw a strange thing through the blades of the fan and moving, and the whole novel came out of this, like, while he was watching the fan go and the fan rate, and like he had this vision, and it kind of came to him in a very PKD way. It takes place on the Blackfeet Indian reservation, and
where is that? What state? Or is it not defined?
It's not defined. I think it's Montana, but I'm not entirely sure. But it's all in the res, and it's basically about these teens who shot a pregnant elk while they were hunting, and it's a reversal of the angry spirit Indian trope.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And, yeah. And
So Wendigos. Got it.
no. But that's it. And that without.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're all
Can I
done.
stop humming to myself?
I can't believe that guy dies that way.
And
I can't believe Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father the whole time.
and my other Dicklike suggestion is Raised by Wolves, the TV series on HBO Max.
Teen Wolf 3.
The what?
Teen Wolf 3.
It is not Teen Wolf 3 at all. Raised by Wolves is
Damn right it's not.
It's a high concept science fiction series. The pilot was directed by Ridley Scott, and it is about it's post-apocalyptic, and it takes place on this other world where these two androids are given the task of raising human embryos.
Oh yeah. I saw a preview for that one.
Yeah,
Looked pretty good.
It has the what is reality, the what is human, the souls of androids. It has religious, social, political things.
Who's doing it?
Well, Ridley Scott directed the pilot.
I don't care who directed it. Who's writing it?
The guy's name is Aaron. Oh, I don't remember his last name.
I can look it up.
Yeah, and he's the writer of that Denis Villeneuve movie, Prisoners, which was really good. And
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Raised by Wolves.
Raised by Wolves. And definitely, even if you don't like the pilot, you got to give it more of a shot because it gets really, really, really interesting the further it goes.
I watched 4 episodes of it, and I could not connect with any of the characters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it serialized? So it's not episodic.
Yeah.
It's serialized.
It's serialized, yeah. Well, I thought it was incredible. It was my favorite thing of the year so far.
Aaron Guzikowski.
Yeah, and I put a request in with the Writers Guild to his agent for an interview, but I don't know if we'll hear anything. But yeah, Raised by Wolves, I thought it was great. It has a lot of PKD themes.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, we'll move on to the main part of the show. Next is Blade Runner, story versus film. So,
But this is our season finale. We'll be back in January with a ton of Blade Runner stuff, and then more books and more everything.
Mm-hmm. So,
in the meantime,
My God, there's only
join
4
us.
for this year.
Join us on Discord, where some of us will be every once in a while trying to build an audience, build this Phil K. Dick community that is
I'll try to get on there more.
less about the university setting and more about the fan setting.
More about the having some drinks and talking with your buddies, and less about the welcome to my academic study about Dick.
Which we all appreciate. We all appreciate those things.
Some of us more than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I hopefully too I could have you guys over on my new podcast. Maybe we'll do one of those movies that we've threatened to argue about for forever.
oh yeah.
Prometheus. If you want a Prometheus episode,
I will
let
totally
us know.
do it.
I'm done. I'm ready. I'm down.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So on that note, keep it paranoid, everybody, and we'll see you in January.
Stay paranoid.
Good night.